And one of our panelists, I think Linda there just mentioned at the end, the business case for sustainability. We didn't put her up to it, but it's a seamless transition into our next panel, which is all about the business case for energy efficiency. So I'm hoping everyone is ready. I can vaguely see. I'm going to welcome, please join me in welcoming to the stage, Ditte Jorgensen, Director General for Energy from the European Commission. Johnny Sjöström, Chief Executive Officer at SSOB. Eva Reisenhuber, Global Head of Sustainability from Siemens Corporation. And Ulrich Gernau, Chief Operating Officer from Grundfos. Thank you. Hi.
Hey.
Thanks. Please take a seat.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm not going to reintroduce myself because I didn't see too much movement. But some of you will just then have to spend the whole time guessing who I am. Well, I'm Helen Clarkson, I'm Chief Exec of Climate Group, but I won't do a full big intro again to Climate Group. But I want to move us on to talk about the business case for sustainability. You know, we talk a lot about the energy transition in terms of long-term targets and breakthrough technologies, future scenarios. But energy efficiency is something very immediate, and it's available now, it's scalable now, and it's working today across every sector. And we see that through the members of our campaigns. I've talked about the EP 100 initiative, where businesses commit to doubling their energy productivity or committing to zero carbon building. And they're showing and proving that energy efficiency isn't just good for the climate, it's good for business. And they've avoided, I mentioned before, the figure of 450 million tons of CO2 equivalents, which is equivalent, they've saved the equivalent of the annual emissions of Brazil. Today's business environment is complex, and companies are coming under pressure from rising energy prices, regulatory scrutiny, growing customer expectations, shifting investor demands. And one of the trends of the year that we've seen, I don't need to probably delve too deep into why, but the words climate change and sustainability are falling out of fashion. At the same time, we are seeing words like competitiveness and energy security very much coming into fashion. And one of the ways, excuse me, of engaging the C-suite often is by engaging through their language. And so one of the things we want to talk about is how we use energy efficiency to play into those things that C-suites want to talk about. And when you invest in energy efficiency, you reduce your risk, improve margins, and make operations more stable and productive, make yourself more attractive to investors and customers. That should all go down incredibly well in the C-suite. And I think that's what we really want to talk about that, because despite all of this, and as we were talking about in the last panel, energy efficiency maybe still isn't getting the visibility or investment it deserves, and maybe that is because it is invisible. I've said over the years, one of my worries about energy efficiency is that CEOs, brackets, male CEOs, like to open things, and they like to put on a high-vis vest and cut a ribbon, and maybe you don't always get that with energy efficiency. So that's what we're going to talk about in this panel, is like, how do you get the business case for energy efficiency? How do you put that in front of C-suites? And we're going to hear from people who are doing that in their different sectors and hear their insights into this topic, how we make this work in the real world. So that's my introduction. And first of all, I'm really pleased to welcome Ditte Jorgensen, Director General for Energy at the European Commission. She's led work across trade, competition, energy policy, including shaping Europe's clean energy transition and advancing fair competition, and brings deep experience in multilateral negotiations, sustainable development, and global partnerships. You've really gone for an easy career, I notice, yes. And now leads the EU's efforts to deliver secure, affordable, and climate-neutral energy for all Europeans.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, and really an honor to join the business side of things, because I think one of the things we have to do as government is to make sure that we facilitate investments into energy efficiency, that we make it attractive, that we help create the opportunities. And the ways we do it in Europe is, first of all, by being very, very clear where we're going. What is the direction? We want to be climate neutral by 2050. We have set ourselves targets by 2030. We're working on targets for 2040. So there's a very clear pathway how to get there. And linked to that is, of course, the regulatory framework, the details, if you will, on how to do it, that helps give the predictability and stability that is necessary for investors. You don't invest if you're not quite sure what the direction is. So the direction is very, very clear, and that stays. Even if the language at times is different, even if you will hear, together with climate, you will hear competitiveness and security, the reality is it's all the same thing, and that's my second point. Energy efficiency for the European Union is one of the fundamental pillars of our energy policy. We need energy efficiency in our energy policy. It's quite simple. We are net energy importers. We are not rich in fossil fuels or in minerals or in most other things. We are rich in sun and wind and innovation and ideas, so we can make it happen. So for our security, for our competitiveness, as well as for the climate, energy efficiency is a necessary component of an energy system, of a wider energy policy, together with clean energy, whether that's renewables or nuclear, together with system solutions, together with interconnectedness and grids. So energy efficiency is a key pillar, and we try to make sure that we create the regulatory framework to make it happen, that we facilitate it, and we try to make sure that it is predictable and stable. So if you invest in Europe, if you come to Europe, you know that that's what you get. There's clarity around it. The last point I want to make is that what we see is that often getting investment and financing for energy efficiency can be difficult. You set out some of the reasons for that. The other thing we see is that for small and medium-sized enterprises, the high upfront capital costs will only bear fruit over time. And so we've been working with the European Investment Bank to address that challenge, among other challenges, is setting up a scheme that can help small and medium-sized enterprises invest in energy efficiency and look at it as an operating cost rather than as a capital cost. So that's an example of what we do on the financing side. Plus, we have established an energy efficiency financial coalition, bringing together the industry side of things with the financial sector, again, to help make it happen.
Great, thank you very much. And next we have Johnny Sjöström, CEO SSAB. Johnny spent his career driving innovation in the steel sector, and today is leading SSAB through one of the most ambitious green transformations in heavy industry. As head of SSAB Special Steels, he's grown the business while also overseeing the transition to fossil-free production at the Oxelösund site, with energy efficiency as a key enabler. Johnny.
Thank you, it's a pleasure to be here. All right, just before I get started, I'm just going to explain a little bit about SSAB as a company and what we do, so you get a better understanding. But just like you said, we are a global steel production company, and we also do distribution and sales around the world. We have mainly production in United States, Sweden, and Finland. The production we have in the United States is based on circularity. We use scrap. And the good thing with using scrap, that you can take an old rusty car that's been in the forest for 50 years and remelt it into premium products. It's circularity, works really good. And that's what we do in the United States. We use only scrap. But in the Nordics, we are using iron ore. You know, if you want to produce steel, you need to use iron. But a good thing is that the planet is full of iron. But the problem with iron is that it's stuck with oxygen. Most of the case, when you get it from the ground, that's what you get from the ore. It's iron oxide. So for us now, what we do today in the blast furnace is that we take carbon, and the carbon reacts with the oxygen, emits carbon dioxide. So 7 to 9% of the global emissions of CO2 comes from steel production. So we have decided that we want to do something about this. And we also have a good chance to become more energy efficient, because the way it is today, we are producing what we call slabs way up north in Sweden, and then we transport by train all the way down to Borlänge, that way it's rolled, and so it's reheated again, and etc. So we lose a lot of energy, and it's not efficient as such. So not only are we planning to reposition the whole production line into the northern part of Sweden, but we also plan to leave the old traditional technology, which is the blast furnace, and go to a new technology. So not only are we going to use scrap, but we're also going to use what we call a sponge iron, reduced by hydrogen gas. And that is really a breakthrough technology. We've been doing research on this for the last 5 years. So instead of using coal as the reacting agent, reacting with the oxygen, we're going to use hydrogen gas. So we're going to get water vapor instead of carbon dioxide. So here we are in the front line. I would say globally, front runner, and I think that we also take the leadership in this transformation. So that's a little bit short about what we do in SSAB.
Great, thank you. Let's turn to Eva. Eva Riesenhuber, Global Head of Sustainability at Siemens Corporation, brings a remarkable combination of legal, financial, and sustainability expertise to her role and leading efforts to embed sustainability deeply across Siemens' global business. Under her watch, Siemens has achieved recognition on the CDP A-list and EcoVadis Platinum, and over 90% of the company's portfolio now delivers positive sustainability outcomes for customers.
Thank you, Helen, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here. So, I love the topic, and you framed it very nicely. We could have stopped at the introduction. But why are we not really on track? If the business case is so obvious, why is it that at COP28 we said we have to double our investments, and now we're looking at it and we say we have to triple it to meet our 4% target? The reason is it's complicated. So when the IEA talks about we need $1.4 trillion of annual investments more in buildings, industry, and transportation, I completely agree. And I can say that because Siemens is active in building, industry, and transportation. And the entire portfolio is focused on electrification, energy efficiency, and renewable integration. You can't separate them. When you really go to system changes, you have to connect it all. Energy efficiency is not a separate topic. It's only in the nucleus. To get the impact, you have to do more. And impact is what we are really out to create. We just last week announced that we set ourselves a new customer-avoided emission target of 1,000 megatons by 2030. That's a gigaton. That's 1.5 times the annual emissions of Germany, or for my Danish friends, it's 33 times the annual emissions of Denmark. But it's not just what we do with our portfolio at the customer, and I fully agree the business case is there. We also calculate a return on invest for everything we do for ourselves. As Helen knows very well, with the climate group targets, we aim to reduce our own emissions without offset by minus 90% by 2030. And we're doing that by using our own portfolio. So today, I have more than 200 sites in real time on my computer. I can see their energy performance. I have contracted it all out. I can optimize it. They're moving from an automatic optimization to autonomous buildings. I have the solar on the roof, the heat pump in the ground. We have building the biggest heat exchanger in Germany, in Berlin, out of wastewater. We're using it all to combine it to get the overall result. And the way to do that, the way we can do this together, is digitalization, data, and AI. So if I go back to the question, why are we not scaling fast enough if the business case is so obvious? It is because it is not the only challenge we have in the world right now. So we need to transition from a centuries build of fossil fuel to a new energy transition. Okay, we're here to discuss that. But we also have the linear economy to the circular economy. And we're doing this in times of geopolitical tension and global competitiveness. We need to think deeper, broader, and further than we ever have before. We can't look at items in isolation. We need to bring it together. And for the first time in human history, we can reimagine global systems. And it is digitalization, data, and AI that will help us to find this way. And I'm very optimistic.
Great, thank you. I've got so much I want to come back on there, actually. But let's go first to Ulrich Gernau, Chief Operating Officer at Grundfos. Ulrich joined the company in 2019 and has held senior roles across marketing, commercial strategy, and now operations. And before Grundfos, he spent 25 years at the Lego Group, where he led global innovation and business transformation. Today, he brings deep leadership experience in driving growth, sustainability, and change across international markets. Ulrich, welcome.
Thank you for having me as well and bringing this important topic to the agenda. I just think energy efficiency is the most powerful move we can make. And I think it's just being here and having the acknowledgement that you did to say that it's one of the pillars of the European energy policy is a major achievement that we have already gotten to. But of course, it's not taking us far enough. We happens to be at Grundfos, the world's largest pump manufacturing company, but what really interests us is solving the world's water and climate challenges. And what we do is really, we move water and try to save as much water and do it with as less energy as possible. 10% of the electricity in the world is consumed by moving water. So energy efficiency is super important, but it's not just because, and it's beyond technicalities. That's where we were. It's also beyond sustainability. It's very important. We were the first pump company to commit to net zero, and it's super important. It's in our values, and it's very important for the climate. But the world has changed, and the narrative has changed, and the rationale for energy efficiency from a strategic point has never been more important. From a competitive point of industries, and particularly our industries in Europe, because of the unfavorable energy prices we have towards sort of our peers in other regions, but also from a consumer point. And let me just give a few examples. If you think about the competitiveness of European industries, if you just look at HVAC systems or water systems, they have a very, very long sort of life cycle of sitting in buildings and so on. But today, you can actually save 30 to 40% of your consumed energy just by switching to a new technology that is readily available. And then you could argue, yeah, but it takes a lot of capex and it's very heavy investment. Yes, it takes some capex, but the payback time on most of these systems is within 2 years, or most of them maybe within 3 years. So actually, the business cases are there. But not only for businesses and competitiveness, also for consumer affordability. It's super important, and consumers are not aware. I was not fully aware of where I could benefit as a consumer from energy efficiency, and I'm sure a big part of you is not even aware, but in most of your houses, if you go into the basement, there's a pump sitting there. It's probably been sitting there for 10, 15 years, but most of them is consuming much more energy that is required today. And just by changing that pump, most of you will be able to reduce your pump energy consumption by 30 to 40%. We believe there's over 200 million pumps in Europe that is sitting in basements, old energy efficient, that could be upgraded. And if we did that with 200 million pumps in Europe, we'll save the annual energy consumption of Portugal. So there's a huge opportunity there, but why is it not happening? And I think you spoke a bit to it on the first panel. Awareness is actually it's complicated, it's technicality, but actually we need to get the awareness out, because a lot of businesses, a lot of consumers are really not aware about how powerful this move can be. So I think awareness, understanding is a very important point of it, and we need to make it more digestible for the sort of generic population and business leaders.
Great, thank you. So let's dive into the discussion, and actually let's start with this digitization point, because as you said that, someone texted me last week and said, AI, good or bad? And I wrote back, mixed. But it seems like you might be able to answer that question a bit better, because we know about the energy costs, but obviously there's the upside on digitization. So could you, and then I want to come and talk about, because the EU is obviously doing a lot on digitization, but let's start with some of the technicalities on it, and how is AI going to help us on this?
Yes, so it's, of course, in order to efficiently run AI, you need to have the data first. In order to have the data, one needs to embrace digitalization. AI without data is not worth the energy. So maybe to give you the power, because one is nothing without the other. So as a technology company, we combine the real and the digital worlds. We've been building infrastructure for 175 years. We know how it works. And now we've developed the software, the digital twin software, which is AI enhanced now, where we can actually simulate, design, test a product, then the production that fits to that product, everything in the virtual world before it is even built. And we can also then link, once it's built, we can link the real-time data and look at it in the metaverse. And that way, people sitting all over the globe can look at the same factory in real time and determine, based on the data, as to where the problems will be. So using AI is just leveling it up one more. It's like being able to crack even more complex data to accelerate and make sure we're actually getting the outcome that our customers need, because they don't sacrifice. It's like they want to be more competitive, more resilient, and sustainable. It's a clear end. They don't want to pay more. They want to get more, and they want it to be sustainable. And we can really leverage it. We're still at the beginning, but just looking at all the data that comes in every single day, it has so much potential here that we actually are positive we can accelerate, because accelerate is what we need to your business case. If we had all the time in the world, we would just transition. If we need to do more by 2030, we need to incentivize and find the way to go this way.
Great. And how does that weigh against what we hear about the energy requirements for the AI itself?
Well, I mean, we heard earlier that AI is actually, when you look at the new data from the IEA, there is a huge energy requirement for AI, but that is not what is causing the main problems when you, for example, compare it with the air conditioning. But AI is also optimizing data centers. So we are using AI in our offering for data centers to make them more energy efficient. We are just at the beginning of what we can do with data centers. And also here, quite honestly, we may not be having the right discussion, because water is creating a lot of stress in data center areas, sometimes more than energy. We need to look holistic. We can't afford to just zoom in on one aspect.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Ulrich, you wanted to come in on that?
You almost spoken to what I wanted to say, but I think the other side of AI and data is the humongous amount of energy and water that it actually consumes. And the Water Resilience Coalition has just sort of announced some data that when I heard them, it was mind-blowing to me. So in 2030, global data centers is going to consume the annual electricity consumption of India and going to consume the annual drinking water consumption of the United States. So therefore, bringing energy efficiency and water efficiency into data centers is a very, very important part. And I think that normally we've been thinking about energy efficiency for heating, but it actually takes double amount of energy to cool 1 degree versus heating 1 degree. So the challenge we have ahead of us, also with rising temperatures, is we simply need to invest much more into the cooling side that we've done for many years into the heating side, because it's a tremendous amount of water and energy that is wasted.
Great.
Yeah, so I have a comment regarding the AI. And of course, when you travel around the world and you see production in developing countries and so on, you said it yourself, based on the data, you need the data in order to optimize. And a lot of production sites around the world does not have the data. It's simple as that. So for me, I think that if you have a very advanced system, you get that information, maybe you can use AI to optimize. But if you don't have it, I think that you need to dig where you stand. You need to find how you can optimize your energy consumption locally and look at the quick wins as a business case for your business.
Great. So let's turn to the EU. Recent legislation packages demonstrate Europe's ambition to turn decarbonisation into an engine of growth. And I also mentioned there's a lot of work happening on digitisation. So how does that all come together, and what needs to be done by the Commission, the national governments and private sectors to kind of get this from being, to being the default, basically, way of doing things?
Thank you. So I think indeed AI and digitization, and my co-panelists have addressed it very, very clearly. What are the must-haves? We need the digitization, we need the AI for an optimized energy system in all parts of the operation of that. And at the same time, it's extremely energy intensive, and that's something where we can become much, much better. So that is an integral part of our energy policy. The way we see our role is, again, to make sure that we create the best possible and most stable, predictable regulatory framework, that we simplify where we can simplify, that we create awareness where we can help doing that from public level, so that the environment for investing in energy efficiency, making use of energy efficiency, benefiting from energy efficiency from a business perspective, that environment is the most conducive environment possible. Now, one of the aspects of that related to digitization specifically is indeed the energy intensity of data centers, and what can we do from a government perspective to address that. Now, there are some things that are done better locally and some things that are done better at European level or global level. If you look at what can be done locally, you've got the whole question of planning and the integrated energy system approach that can really help. So we see some places in Europe where the data centers are built together with a town or a city, and where the local district heating system benefits from the waste heat that you referred to before. There's a lot that can be gained there, so the cooling is no longer a problem. The cooling is a gain because that waste heat goes into energy use either in the local district heating or in a local industry, manufacturing, whatever sector that is. So that's the local approach. At European level, what we are trying to do specifically on digitization and data centers is both to help these investments, to help scale up artificial intelligence investments, data in Europe, but also to make sure that there's clarity around what do we expect from data centers, what do we expect from companies that are particularly active in that field in terms of the energy efficiency, what are the requirements, how cool does it have to be, how do you plan it, what are the pumps you use, what is the water use, how do you actually do that in a way that aligns with the broader objectives of sustainability, climate neutrality, but of course also the objective of competitiveness and energy security.
Great, thank you. Let's turn to talk about heavy industry. So, for a company like yours, it's hugely energy intensive, as you were talking about. Therefore, energy efficiency is very important for your bottom line. How's policy helping you make those savings, and where's other market drivers for you to do that?
So SSAB is investing 5 billion euros in changing the technology, transforming to a more CO2 neutral production. 5 billion is a lot of money for us. I think it would be for anyone. And that means that the ETS system that we have, the regulatory ETS system, needs to maintain. We cannot change that, because if it does, it will pretty much hurt our business case. So for me, it's extremely important that we continue sort of the road that we have decided to go on, and we shouldn't change it. We shouldn't even question it, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult for all this transformation that we're planning for.
Yeah. Ulrich, what do you think the most helpful steps that policymakers can take to put in place the conditions for sort of market growth, for energy efficiency, all the things that you were talking about before? What do you want to see from policymakers?
I think we have come a great first step. I mean, if you look at the Europe with the Building Performance Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive, where I'm hesitant and concerned is on the implementation side of this, and what's the speed with which it's going to happen, and how are we going to enforce that actually member states really make the change. And I think we heard from the panel previously, like a country as Romania obviously have moved fast. But I also think that we're going to see down the line, half a year, that countries have not moved that far. And what is then going to happen? And my invitation to the politicians would be that now you engaged well with business in the making of it. Plan now for that it's going to be difficult in half a year and a year. And what is in the dialogue you're going to take with the industry on how we can work together to actually make sure that speed is being taken of that. Because I don't think we will not face that implementation slowness. We will face it. So let's think about how we can actually keep the dialogue after that.
Great. Do you want to respond?
Yes, I think those are really, really good points. That where we are now in Europe, and it's not the same everywhere in the world, is that we have that regulatory framework in place. We've got our Energy Efficiency Directive, Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. We've got the regulatory stability, predictability that you asked for. If you've made investments into energy efficiency or into lowering your greenhouse gas emissions, you want to know that that investment is worth it, and that requires the regulatory predictability and stability. So where we are now, that we have that very good framework in place, is implementation and working both with national governments and with industry, with business, to make sure that implementation happens, that it happens in the best possible way, meaning the way that is as easy as possible, as smooth as possible, as cost efficient as possible, and that brings the results that are necessary. And again, that comes back to the business case. It does make sense. It does bring savings. It does bring competitiveness. It does bring innovation. So our job is to work closely both with member states and with industry. For that reason, we have established both a kind of a broader set of implementation dialogues where we really look at what is it that needs to be done, specifically on energy efficiency. We've got an energy efficiency coalition. We've got specific work with industry, and then, as I mentioned before, with the financial sector as well, because investments are needed. How do we facilitate the access to finance for energy efficiency investments? Again, also for smaller companies. Here we are joined by large actors, large European companies, but I think for small and medium-sized enterprises and companies elsewhere in the world where access to finance is a much bigger challenge than what we see in Europe, we can do more there, I think.
Great. Hubert, did you want to come in on that?
If I can wish for something, so as a global company, we're obviously navigating the US, China, and Europe. And Europe has set a course, and we're fully supporting it. As you said, the framework is set. We do need the stability. We can't change ETS around because it's like companies are betting their existence on this framework existing. But we have another, if you want to take the people along, we have to show that all of that data that we now have to report, for better or for worse, is worth something. So that means demand creation. That means actually using this data that comes out of CSRD and the EU taxonomy, not accept that the system isn't closed yet, but close the system. The Green Deal was a deal in 2021. It was launched, and it was supposed to have $1 trillion in financing behind it. That money was never really there. So now is the opportunity to actually unlock the potential to create the demand. I believe the EU has already taken some very clear signals with the clean industrial deals and other things. The next 5 years will be very, very decisive to show that Europe can be the leader in energy efficiency in particular, because this is a strength of Europe, but it would help to get a bit more of tailwind.
Do you want to reply?
Well, I
She's written it down.
Exactly. I took note, and I think these are very, very good points. I mean, I think we launched the European Green Deal and our climate neutrality objective in 2019. A lot has happened since then. We've been through COVID, a global lockdown, with a significant impact also on the energy sector and with more severe impacts in other parts of the world than in Europe. We have seen Russia invade Ukraine and weaponize energy, and that brought an energy crisis in Europe. So some of these are obstacles or challenges. Some of it are also incentives for making it happen, for implementing and to deliver and to deliver the results. While we need the regulatory stability beyond doubt, and while we will maintain that, I still think we can also simplify. You referred to some of the reporting and what are the requirements. So I think another objective for us is that in implementing it in our dialogue, both with national authorities and with industry, we look at where can we simplify. Are there things where we can lower some of the reporting burden? Then that's also a good thing.
Great. In our work, particularly on renewable electricity, we see just this great engine between the EU driving the export economies in Asia and what they need to do to up their renewables. And so when I get asked as well about what's happening in the States at the moment, you can point to, I'm worried about the States, but I'm worried in a way, not more, to some extent more about Europe, because if that, like you say, the leadership legislation goes, that has driven change in so many parts of the world and is really, really important in the next few years. do you say well, we always say the next 5 years are critical. That's a kind of evergreen statement, has been for the last sort of 20, I think. Let's talk a bit, maybe it's me, we've wandered a little bit away from the business case for energy efficiency, so let's kind of bring it back a bit. For people who are listening to this, how do you get that business case? You'll all talk about it in really strategic terms for your companies. How's that happened? You get it from that kind of operational piece where I think sometimes it sort of gets stuck. How do you get it up into that strategic conversation? Let's discuss that, Johnny.
So energy efficiency has always been around for us, always. I mean, the production sites we have are quite old, and some of them were built just after the Second World War. So we learned how to recover everything, off gases, recover energy, heat, recovery. We make tar out of some of the residues from the coke oven. We take care of more or less everything. But now we're facing a situation where we're changing our production completely. And we also now use coal as the energy agent. So we buy roughly 18 terawatt hour per year, and that's going to be transformed into 4 to 5 terawatt hours of electricity instead. So it's a very big transition for us. I think, and also a very big step in this transition. But it's probably the biggest step that SSAB will ever do in history, and also maybe in the future as well, where we do a massive amount of energy efficiency. But we have to remember also we change from going from coal or coke to electricity. Then, of course, it depends on how the electricity system is constrained and how available it is. But it's a big change for us, of course.
Yeah. Eva, how do you do that with both at Siemens? How's that happen, and with your clients, I think?
I mean, we are in the fortunate position that actually, since we are in societal infrastructure, these changes, climate change, biodiversity loss, it's the planetary boundaries, that is pushing societal infrastructure onto a new level. So if we want to have the trust of our customers, we have to actually do these things ourselves. And this is how we're starting really going deeper. This innovation has always been at the heart of what we do, but now it's like with a very clear purpose. How can we actually find the way to make this happen? How can we support our customers to optimize for the future? Not the past. It's like reimagine what is possible and actually find a way, because the investments that some of our customers take, I mean, electrifying India transportation, changing the infrastructure of Egypt, we do have quite a few very esteemed government customers, the building fleet in UAE. This is a lot of trust. And it's one of investments that are big. And they are looking for partners who can sit there and think what is needed for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, because this is how long our portfolio lasts. And that responsibility we take very seriously.
Great. Ulrich.
I just think the moment is ours to win right now. And I think if I go 3 or 4 years back, I would have argued for energy efficiency, though still meaningful and everything. I would be sitting here and probably mostly argue it from a CO2 perspective and argue it from, it makes sense from the natural resources, and it still does, and we need to continue caring about that. But the narrative is changing 180% right now. Resiliency of business, supply chains are changing. The electrification that is happening is going to double and triple the need of energy. And I think the business cases that just sort of on the numbers show that it's becoming right now, the technology advancements we have and with the prices of energy, it's actually more beneficial than ever to actually make the switch. So I think that we have an opportunity to change the narrative about energy efficiency, and it actually becomes easier because the narrative is actually simpler, because there is a fundamental resiliency and economic reason for doing this. And I think we should take that moment right now to adopt that narrative, and everyone actually make sure we mobilize people, and that is consumers and industry, much more about the benefit. And it's not rocket science, it's actually quite simple math in the end, that it makes sense doing it.
When you do that, so one thing that I agree, I mean, I agree, and I've said for years, I don't need not everyone has to be a tree hugger like me, right? You know, people come to this for their own reasons, and you know, it doesn't have to be a moral story. I worry that if we pull climate change out of the narrative entirely, which you see happening, then people, yeah, they're feeling climate impacts, but don't then associate it back to climate change. So I think there's a balance around how do you, it's hard to explain resilience if you're not sort of resilient to what, and understanding climate change. Are you saying how we get that balance right in how we engage people? Because I agree with you in principle, but also we don't want it to seem like this is just random weather that's happening if we're going to build this for the long term and get people to sort of understand why they're doing things differently. Do you see what I mean?
And I mean, the reality is it's both and.
Yeah.
And I think talking to both and is super important. But I think there's just becoming much more weight right now to this side of the competitiveness and the affordability that hasn't been there before. And but of course, efficiency and energy efficiency is still consuming less of the resources. So of course that is important. But it doesn't stand on that on its own any longer.
Agree.
Yeah, thank you. To follow up on that and also on your questions, I think you said you were worried for Europe. I'm not. I think part of the narrative that we are building essentially rests on the fact that we all know climate change is a reality. We all know it's an existential threat. We know it's happening and we know we need to act. So we don't need to talk again about the science underpinning that. The science is there and we know it. But we can build it together with a wider narrative. We do it both for the climate, but we also do it for competitiveness and we do it for security. To give you a very operational example, we saw at the beginning of the Russian war in Ukraine, the weaponization of energy. We were talking to companies across Europe because at the time we didn't know, would we have gas to keep us warm in the winter? Would we have gas to keep the lights on through the first winter of the war of the Russian war in Ukraine? We talked to companies about energy savings. We were helped by the IEA and the savings plan. We talked to one company that is specialized in energy efficiency technologies. And they said to us, you know, it's very, very interesting. We have not before used our own technologies in our own manufacturing processes because we didn't really have to. Energy was fairly cheap. It was no longer cheap in the summer of 2022 in Europe. And so that company that itself was a driver of energy efficiency globally, in itself was a technology leader, simply did not have a sufficient incentive to make use of its own technologies. And so I think that cost and competitiveness narrative is an important one to bring in there just to make things happen. So as I said, I'm not worried about Europe. I do worry about other parts of the world that need energy efficiency investments, that can benefit from these investments for livelihoods, and where that is not happening. So I think the global conversation is an important one. That's the reason we launched at COP28, work for an alliance around a doubling of energy efficiency by 2030 and a tripling of renewables energy by 2030. That became part of the globally agreed commitments from COP28. But we need to make it happen. And again, we see that's happening in some parts of the world, including in Europe. But we do see it's a lot more challenging in parts of the world where people don't have access to electricity. But if you combine that access and the build-out of renewables with energy efficiency, you will give more people access to that energy much, much faster. So the Global Energy Transition Forum that we have launched is about that, is about making it happen also in those parts of the world that actually need it the most, but where is more challenging.
Great, thank you. That's really interesting. We've got time for one final thought each, so I'll start and kind of come along. Let's leave people with maybe one last bit of advice on how they set out that business case for energy efficiency as they go back after this conference.
Chase where the impact is. Don't sort of get overwhelmed with trying to do everything, but actually find out where is as a business, where is your main energy consumption and where can you actually focus, and then start there. Chase the impact.
Great. And don't assume someone else has already done it as well, I think, on that one. Eva?
If you can't find the business case, you probably need to think a little bit bigger.
Right.
It's always there.
Great.
Yeah, as a final comment, I just realized that when we were talking about this, that we use and we recover the heat, let's say in the production site in Luleå, and heat pretty much all the houses in that city of Luleå. All the houses with recovering the heat. And we do the same thing in Oxelösund. So we've done this for years. For us, we talk about business case. you have the return pretty fast. And so talking about looking at it as a business case, even though it's not your core business, it reduces your cost or adds an extra revenue. So it is clear. It's been very obvious for us through the years that it makes sense.
It's probably a good example of going one level higher, right? Sort of looking broader. Great.
Well, I think our job is in the public sector and the government sector is to make it simple, to help create the conditions under which it can happen. And so if the business sector has other thoughts, other things we should do, other things we can do to facilitate this, then we are very much ready to listen.
Great. Well, this has been a great discussion. Thank you all very much for your contributions, and we've roamed over, I think, some good territory there. Everyone's now allowed to go and have lunch, but not until you've thanked our panelists for everything they've shared with us. Thank you.
Thank you very much to you. Thank you. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.